I don't know. Mr.
All right.
Sorry.
For many of you, Student Congress is going to be like the main event for the semester. This is going to, this would be a good word, I was going to say absorb, that's not what I want. This is basically going to take over your life in second period till probably about the end of December. So, and November is a very quick month just because of the number of days that you have off. You got 3 days next week, and then you have a 5-day week, then it's Thanksgiving. And then you come back and basically it's December. So, but this is going to be certainly going into the end of the calendar year. I think we'll finish up before you have winter break. And then when you come back, there's really only a couple weeks left in the semester for the course. So this is going to be like the real big thing that we do. That doesn't mean it's going to be overly difficult or intimidating, but there are certainly a lot of steps that are going to be going on with it. Point-wise, this is going to be more points than even what's listed on here, because there certainly are some other things that are going to be going on. But for things that you want to be aware of, especially since you got a lengthier weekend, when we come back on Wednesday, which is going to be the 9th, I believe, you're not going to have any assignments that are due. Okay, we're going to talk about Student Congress, and hopefully when you walk out of here, you'll have an idea as to what you can start to do over the course of the weekend. But when you come back on Wednesday, you don't have anything that is going to be due right when you walk in. The two parts that you do need to be concerned with a little bit, though, is going to be this research planner here where it says 15 points. That's going to be for next Friday. So a week from today, Friday, November the 11th, I'm going to be checking that part in. I'm going to certainly explain to you what it means here in a moment. And then the other thing for next Friday is you do have a parliamentary procedure quiz. I think that's your last quiz for the semester. Speaking of quizzes and stuff, your midterm part 2, I just put them into Power School last period. They were good, so I don't think anyone's going to look at something and go, oh my goodness, I got a 12 out of 30 or anything like that. Scores are very good, so I was happy with those. For Student Congress in itself, though, the research planner, the 5-argument organizer, the parliamentary procedure quiz, these are all going to be things that are going to be leading up to Student Congress in itself. Your actual Student Congress grade is going to be built out of these two things right here. So your total grade for Student Congress is going to be out of 100 points. 75 of those points are your actual speech that you're going to give. What you're going to do is you are proposing a law, and you are presenting it to the Student Congress, which are the people within this room, and then it is going to be debated. Questions will be asked, pro speeches will be given, con speeches will be given, more questions will be asked, and then we'll take a vote to it. Whether Caitlin's bill passes or not, that has no bearing on her grade whatsoever. So if it gets voted down, 22-0, that doesn't mean she has a 0 for a grade. Nor if it wins 22-0, does that guarantee 100% or anything like that. The vote is more for show or anything than anything else. But basically, you're going to be proposing some kind of law. It could be a school law, so district policy, Northwest High School policy. You could be doing something for local government, Ross, Westview, Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. You could be doing something on a state level, or you could do something on a federal level. We're not going to go global. So Dan cannot propose that the United States of America will absorb Canada, and we will now become North Americana or something like that as a new country. You're thinking about it now, aren't you? So you can you can certainly do federal government, ideas and regulations and things like that, but we're not going to be taking over other countries or changing currencies in other nations and whatnot. We're not going global with any of that kind of stuff. But you can propose a new law, or you could decide that you want to repeal a current law. If something's going on, you don't think that's a good idea. JT is tired of this whole Cinderella license thing that he has to deal with. He's going to wipe that out so he can drive around whenever he wants with whomever he wants. At the age of 13, why not even, go all out for it? So you can kind of start thinking about what kind of bills that you would want to propose. So your actual speech, which is going to be 5 to 7 minutes, is going to make up the 75 points. In addition to those 75 points, then, you get points by asking questions to other speakers or giving pro speeches and con speeches. And basically, you are accumulating those points. Questions can be worth 1 or 2 points. Pro-con speeches can be worth 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, all based on their effectiveness. So Ethan asked a question. Me grading it, I think it's a stupid question. he gets 1 point. Sam asks a good question, she gets 2 points. It's not that you have gotten a 1 out of 2, a 50%, and you have a 100%. It's just that you have added 2 points where Ethan has only added 1 point. You have the ability to add 30 points. So if you get a 75 out of 75 on your speech, you get all 30 points that you can accumulate. That's going to give you a total of 105. So in Student Congress and Power School, you would end up with a 105 out of 100. So you potentially could get some bonus points. If JT gives a speech, it's solid, it's not great. You get a 60 out of 75, so it'd be like a B minus and 80%. He earns all 30 points, you would end up with like a 90 out of 100 for Student Congress. Ethan?
If you were given for a bond speech, are there like time requirements or anything?
Yeah, we'll go over that stuff here in a little bit. The one thing, and this is not on my sheet up here, but it is on your front packet. Notice that it does say, this is the first part that's in bold, a maximum of 10 graded questions can be asked by students. The remaining points for pro-con speeches and questions must be earned through speeches. What that simply does, we have a big class. Student Congress is a lengthy project. It just takes a lot of time to get through all the videos, all the speeches and whatnot, bless you. To try to kind of keep it moving, I'm limiting the number of questions that people can ask for points. So Chris, theoretically, if we were not doing that, could ask 30 crappy questions, all be worth 1 point, and you would earn your 30 points. By putting the limit at 10, if you ask 10 crappy questions, you have 10 points. You have to earn the rest of pro-con speeches. If you ask 10 really good questions, you could earn 20 points, but you would still have to earn the rest of pro-con speeches. So you certainly want opportunities, because everybody is going to speak, but I don't want, 25 questions being the way in which Maisie can color points or Chris or Anton. It's just forcing a little bit of variety to take place with it. So the main things to understand at this point, you're going to have a research planner, which we're going to talk about next Friday, and then next Friday you have a quiz. Those would be the first two things. In my mind so far as timeline, Student Congress in itself would not be beginning until that short week before Thanksgiving. I think that's the 21st is that Monday. So I'd like to start 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and then I think we come back to school on the 29th, and then we would pick up again with that. So we're certainly still, about 3 weeks away from this thing taking shape. The quiz for next Friday is going to be on this. Your Student Congress we do is through parliamentary procedure. So your quiz is about parliamentary procedure. Parliamentary procedure basically means that there's just going to be a formal way that things go about. I'm giving a speech. Emily wants to ask me a question. She raises her hand. The presiding officer calls on her, and she goes, will the speaker yield to a question? I will go, yes. And then she stands up and asks me a question. So there's formal ways in which things get done. The quiz is just making sure that people understand what those things are. So it is not going to be the chart where you have to fill it in, but the whole idea is that you are aware of what all these motions are, what the definitions for those, do they require a second? So at the end of the period, Anton goes, I motion to recess, JT goes, I second, all in favor, aye, we are adjourned, out for recess. So the big thing that I would say is know what your motions are with their definitions, and then take a look, because what would certainly be what's the only motion that doesn't need second? Main motion. And the main motion is just the bill. So it's time for JT's bill. We don't second your bill. Your bill's on the floor and we start reading it. So knowing which ones are a little bit of an outlier. Amendments, they don't require just one person to second. They would require a third of the Student Congress body to second it. Basically, everything is a vote for majority with the exception of previous question, which requires a 2/3 majority. Previous question means you want to vote on voting. David has already given his bill. We've argued about it. Dan goes, I moved a previous question. He's basically saying, I want to vote on it. And then we go all in favor, aye, aye. Then we vote on the bill. So it's kind of like a double vote that kind of starts to take place. So understanding that the only one that's different about when it's coming to vote being a majority, previous question, that's the one that I would want to focus on. Are the bills debatable? Really, there are only two bills that are debatable, the main motion and the amendment. You're not going to go, I move to lay the bill on the table, which means we're going to suspend for the day and then have a debate about whether or not we should stop debating for the day. That's just called petty arguments. So your quiz, like I said, is not going to be a chart where you're going to fill in all this information, but it's going to be questions about the chart. So which vote doesn't need a second, or what is the definition of removing the bill from the table? Just understanding what those concepts are. That's what your quiz is going to be about for Friday. Okay. Good. The other thing that I want you for Friday is your research planner. All this is basically the rough draft of the bills that you want to do. I know I didn't really tell you to think about it. Anybody have any idea what some bill might be that they would be interested in doing? So 11, 12 on this floor, 9. That's going to shake up the whole system. Well, I need to sit down. Like, you want this effective immediately?
ASAP.
Seems logical.
My heart's pounding. All right, so all you would do, JT, is basically go 910 office, 3rd, 1112 office, 1st. Basically it just kind of lets me know what. Now, the one thing, and this might be a little bit tougher for you, although things like student handbooks are worthwhile, district websites, all bills I do want some kind of source. You could do an interview. You could ask people, about it. The source does not mean that you are in, that the source does not mean it's in support of the bill, but it could be a source that is in support, or it could be something that kind of instigates the change, that you are thinking about. You come across an article mentioning that, there are too many teen driving accidents happen in the morning before school or something like that, and therefore you decide, people are pretty sleepy and groggy in the morning, maybe we should push back school start time to like 11 a.m. So that article might not tie in with what your specific bill is directly, but it's kind of like the inspiration for it or whatnot. That would be something you could do. That one might be a little bit tougher with switching the office, but we can talk about it and figure out. Someone asked, can I have multiple sources for one possible bill? Yes, but you can't put 2 sources with one and therefore then skip sources for number 2. Your research planner is going to be worth 15 points. Basically, you're getting 2 points for a very rough draft of your bill, and you're getting 1 point for having a source. What are you going to do with all those sources? Put them in the noodle bib. So even if you don't go with bill number 1, the source that you have for bill number 1, 3, 4, 5, they can go into noodle bib even though you're only using bill number 2. Having you come up with 5 bills does a couple things. Number 1, your first idea isn't always the best. Maybe you decide, I don't know if I can do a 5 to 7 minute speech on switching the house offices. Maybe you can. The other thing is you are going to email your formal bill to me on Sunday, November the 13th. Not this weekend coming up, but the weekend after. It's first come, first serve. Joey sends me a bill going, he's switching the 910 office and the 1112 office. You send me your bill, but he gets it to me at 4:30. You get it to me at 4:32. Sorry, he wins. So if you do have to switch bills, now you have rough drafts of other bills that you can formally start to put in. We are not going to have any bills that repeat. So hence you're coming up with 5 options so you can have other ones. We're also not going to do any topics that we have already debated in class. So mandatory voting, lowering the voting age to 16, those things we've already discussed. We're not going to do them again. We wouldn't be having, eliminating the jury system since Joe and Brian already did those things. If there was a mass media topic that didn't get debated, that can still get done within your bill, and you can certainly still have media coming in somehow, some way. But there is no reason that this has to be media related. It doesn't have to be political. Obviously, switching to house offices would not be any of those things. Any initial questions yet at this point? So the page after, it's just the same thing for bill number 4, bill number 5. This page, don't cross it out, but you're not worried about it yet. We're not there. This isn't going to be until we know what everyone's bills are. Same thing with this one. You do get a rubric for what your speech is going to look like. I mentioned to you it's going to be 5 to 7 minutes. It's really not very different from the eloquent speech that you just did. You have a 1-minute opening, roughly. You have a 3-minute body of your speech. You have approximately a 2-minute rebuttal and closing. You add that time up at 6 minutes. The difference is you're not debating against anybody. You're just going to be up here speaking. So when Lindsay comes up, she's going to speak for her 5 to 7 minutes. She's still doing the same part she did before, but that will be uninterrupted this time. So you don't have to worry about, okay, now Chris is going to do his opening and now I go. And then he goes again and now I go. You're just going to be up here speaking the whole time. I'll still be sitting in the back of the room holding the note cards so you know how much time. If you speak for at least 5 minutes, you have fulfilled your obligation. If you speak for 7:01, that's when I start to cut you off.
So would you?
I was going to call him Maisie. Did you have a question?
Yeah. I was gonna ask. So wait, is my rebuttal just gonna be like what I think the other person is?
That was a good point. I was going to bring that part up. So for your speech, like we're still going to do our attention grabber, preview the main points. You're still citing the 2 sources like you did before. You have your 2 main points at least. You could have more, and you have a rebuttal point. Now, your point is I'm not arguing against Anton or Brooklyn, so it's not like I have to do a counter argument. But you would be you would basically be bringing up the opposing viewpoint, and then kind of diffusing any concerns that they might have. So I don't know what the rebuttal argument's going to be quite for the 11, 12, 9, 10 office off the top of my head. But if somebody was bringing up, we're going to change we're going to make college tuition free for everybody. What's going to be a concern that folks would probably have? How are you going to pay for it? So in your rebuttal point now, many of you might be worried that federal income taxes might be going up, or there's going to be money getting taken out of other parts from within the government, but this is how I'm going to pay for it, or this is how it's going to be funded. So you're basically acknowledging that there's probably going to be people who disagree with you, but then you trying to diffuse their concerns. So you go, your transitions will be now some folks might argue, some people could be concerned that. That's the cue that you're going into your rebuttal point. So it's basically you acknowledging in advance, this is what I think people who would be against my bill are going to use as their argument, and now I'm going to explain why that's not really going to be a concern. Tamara, did you have a question too? Chris?
I was going to ask about the rebuttal.
Okay. She just beat you to it. So is that, and you will still get a speech planner, just like we did before. It'll be slightly different for Student Congress, but you'll still have the ability to kind of plan those things out. And speech planners, I'll collect from everyone at the same day, as in works cited page and all those things. And we will determine a speech order, so you know who's going first, second, third, fourth, all that kind of stuff. We don't assign dates, because if a bill takes 15 minutes, we'll move right on to the next one. Some bills take longer. We can't guarantee what day people are going, but you'll know if you're first, second, third, fourth, so on and so forth. Still have then the eloquence that's going to get used. This time we're going to go 2 tropes, 2 schemes, and then the whole eye contact delivery, which folks did a very nice job with last time. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. I have all your rubrics, and then as you ask questions, I start putting down points for things that you have done, so that I can just kind of tally how many points you have when it's all said and done. And I'll give you updates. So the numbers that you have down here, that'll get added to this total, and that'll give us your total score out of 100 points. Right?
I did the speeches real quick. I put on speeches.
I'll show you here in a minute. The last page, and this is the one that's on the very, very back. This is only for the bill that you submit to me formally, your email copy. This is not for the bill planner, those 5 topics. This is only for the formal bill that you submit. everyone's bill is going to basically have 4 parts. Number 1, you state your new policy. Number 2, you define any terms that could be ambiguous. You give us an implementation date. Could be as early as this will be, this is effective immediately, or you could give a specific date. Some people will kind of grandfather their ideas in, where if you're a lot of times, when it comes to new sources of power or energy, people want to move away from fossil fuels, maybe go into nuclear energy. They're not going to say starting on October the 18th, 2018, everybody must switch. But, certain percentages of the population must be using by 2020, 2030, things like that. And then the last statement for everybody, you will use word for word. All laws that are in conflict will be declared null and void. So if you are doing something that at this moment would be considered, unconstitutional, for example, if we did like Joe and Brian's bill where we're going to remove juries, everyone has a right to trial by their peers, bless you. By us changing that, we would then be going, all laws that are in conflict will be declared null and void, so you don't have to worry about it. And then you sign your name. So at the bottom, I have an example. By me having an example, that means you can't do this one. So I took the one where if you are can't use that one. I hate you, Mr. Kane. You ruined my life. Yeah, I'll strike that down. Part 1, all individuals 65 years of age or older must be retested in order to maintain a valid driver's license within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's my bill. My second part, then, this includes the driving license of all motorized vehicles, including but not limited to cars, trucks, commercial vehicles, motorcycles, and recreational vehicles. So now I am defining ambiguous terms by what I mean by licenses. The test to maintain the driver's license will include an objective written exam as well as a road test exam. That's also an ambiguous term because now I'm explaining how they're going to be retested. My implementation date, and you can tell the bill's a little old, the implementation date, this law will go into effect immediately for all Commonwealth citizens who turn 65 years of age on January the 1st, 2016 or later. Residents will have 30 days after the date of turning 65 years of age to complete the required revalidation process. All residents already of the 65 years or older with a current valid driver's license will have until July 1st, should say 2016, to revalidate their current license. So that was my implementation date that's taking place. Had one other little part to it. Citizens must continue to revalidate their driver's license within a 5-year time period of that initial revalidation date. So if you're 70, 75, 80, you'll get it retested. And then all laws that are in conflict will be declared null and void. So when you email your bill to me, it's going to look like this. Not this Sunday, but the Sunday after. On Monday, November the 14th, when you come in, there's going to be a stack of packets where we're going to have everybody's bill. We sit down, read over the bills, make sure we're clear on what all the bills are stating, and then you're able to start kind of planning your own speech as well as arguments that you might have for pro-con speeches against other people's bills. I know this isn't answering your format question yet, but the page that I kind of crossed out up here where it mentioned about 5 argument organizer, you can then go, okay, Emily's bill, Joe's bill, David's bill, Sam's bill, these are the reasons I don't like it, con speech. Maisie's bill, I like this bill, pro speech, and kind of plan out some ideas for it. For pro-con speeches, you have the ability to look up information, statistics, sources for your pro-con speeches. So in theory, you could prepare a pro-con speech for all other, there would be 23 bills besides your own. If each one had a source, all of those sources would go into your Doodle Bid project. So the idea is Student Congress, we're talking about 5 sources for this, 5 sources here. I haven't even gotten into the whole your sources that you would use for your own bill. You can very quickly accumulate a lot of sources for it. Okay.
Is there going to be a limit on how many pro-con speeches per?
Yes. One of, slowly answering your question, one of you is going to be presiding officer. That means you get to bang a gavel and call on people. Tamara wants to be that person. And we'll vote on the process, we'll see who wants to do it. If you are presiding officer, you will still present a bill. You don't get out of that. But presiding officer can't do pro-con speeches because you're objective, you're calling on people. The presiding officer does not grade anybody, I still take care of that, but they take care of calling on folks. Now, you know, if Brian slides JT, who's presiding officer, a couple bucks every day, that does not mean that Brian can get called on all the time. As people start to ask questions, Brian's asked 5 questions, Emily's asked 3 questions, both hands go up, the presiding officer's gonna call on Emily, because she has asked fewer. When it's time for pro-con speeches, you've given 3, David's given 1, he's gonna get called on before you, just so there's some equity in it. Generally speaking, I limit it to 3 pro and 3 con speeches, so that we're not here for hours upon hours upon hours. So you, for accumulating those extra points, you don't want to say, well, when we get to the last 3 or 4 bills, then I'll take care of it, because you just might not have enough time, or enough options and things like that. So they're generally, most people, you're able to get probably the speeches that you want. But if it's a hot topic, you know, and David puts his foot in his mouth, like he did that one time, 12 con hands go up, only 3 of you are most likely going to get this bill. And sometimes there's bills where you're going, wow, this one is going to really get livid, and nothing happens. And then there's other bills where, wow, this isn't going to be a big deal. Oh my goodness, you want to move the 11-12 office? Are you serious? And everyone starts going nuts. We had a bill a couple of years ago where the person wanted to get rid of road salt in the winter and wanted to switch to like cinders and kitty litter. You would have thought Armageddon was coming. People were livid. I still don't understand why, but they were mad. You can't do that. We're Western PA. We use salt. And it just kept going. Okay, calm down. I thought this was going to be, what's the big deal? You know, so you never know what can take place. People are all about their road salt, apparently. So the presiding officer is the one who kind of keeps things moving. At the beginning of the class period, I really don't say a whole lot. You know, if Maddie's presiding officer, she bangs the gavel, I call Student Congress to order, and then we just kind of get going with it. If Madison were to be presiding officer, she would still give her speech, and then we kind of have like a vice presiding officer who would take over for that day. So everything would certainly still move pretty smoothly. I'm going to go over the structure here with you because I know people certainly have questions about that. Not formal notes that you need to write down, but just more explanation as to what's going on. Some of this is going to be repeat. So everyone's going to be presenting one bill. I'll give you a planner, just like we did before, where you're going to plan on speaking 5 to 7 minutes. You're advocating why your bill should pass. And again, that can be local level, school level, could go state, could go federal government. We've had things with school times, you know, we've had things where if you're an athlete, you don't need to take gym class. We've had things where, you know, study halls should be eliminated so more people are taking classes. If you are, we've done things with early exit, where if you have enough credits by your junior year, you should be able to leave early if need be. College tuition is certainly something you can take a look at. Metal detectors and things like that have gotten brought up. And then you get into other things within the state, within federal government, you know, banning things like animal testing. I think we've had things before with animals like, you know, zoos. We need to change the way that those are run. And that was before, you know, Harambe and all that kind of stuff taking place. That people talk about like breathalyzers having to be put into cars in the factory. So before Dan were to drive, he would have to blow into it to check, you know, blood alcohol content level and stuff like that. So things can certainly go all over the place. David, there have been arguments about handguns being allowed on college campuses. So, you want to give it another shot? Bad fun. I thought you would have picked up a little bit quicker on that one. But you would be advocating the passage of your bill. After your speech, and I did not mention this part, we will ask you questions. And probably, there's not a set number of questions like there are for pro-con speeches, but usually 4 to 5 minutes. If no one asks a question, then I'm going to ask you a question. The questions need to be direct. The type of questions I don't want taking place, I call them speechifying questions. Don't you think that Or wouldn't you agree that? Because if that's the lead-in for your question, what are you basically giving then? Or an opinion, your viewpoint. And I don't want that to happen because you have an opportunity for pro speeches, you have an opportunity for con speeches. So save the opinion for there. But you're looking for clarification. What did you mean by? What would be an example of? How much money do you think this would, cost and whatnot? So we'll ask you some questions. After your speech and your questions, then we can do pro speeches. And generally speaking, we run with 3. If there's a bill that I think, warrants maybe more pro-con speeches, I'll let you know. You have up to 3 minutes. Chris, I think you were asking about allotment of time. There is not a necessary structure that you have to do. The 5 argument organizer, where you are able to identify 5 bills that you would like to pro or con, by you filling that out, you have the opportunity to plan for them. That's not your guarantee that you are going to give a pro-con speech, nor is it my guarantee that you will be able to give a pro-con speech. If Dom comes up with a bill that every single person here wants to con, you're not going to all be able to go. But it gives you the idea that you can plan it out. Probably 3/4 of the pro and con speeches are not formally planned. Sam says something that ticks people off. Ethan says something that folks go, wow, what a great idea, and you just feel the need to come up and speak. Generally, I would say most pro-con speeches are probably around 60 seconds. So it's not going to be your attention grabber, the 2 sources that you're going to reference, and your use of eloquence. That's not going to be a requirement. It's basically your reaction. If you speak for 60 seconds, we can then ask you, the pro-con speaker, questions. So you give a speech, Maisie cons your speech, you do have the opportunity to ask her questions.
That's an extra question.
Whoa. We didn't even get into will the speaker yield to a follow-up question where you can kind of do a double question from time to time. If Maisie speaks for 3 minutes, she does not have to field any questions because she has used that allotted time. So there is a little bit of gamemanship with it. For your main bill, when Chris gives his speech and then Sam asks you a question, you have to answer the question. She will go, will the speaker yield to a question? You will say yes. For the pro speech or a con speech, you're giving a pro speech, she goes, will the speaker yield to a question? If it's a pro or a con speech, you do have the ability to say no. And then she gets mad. Be careful though, because next time she gives a speech and you want to ask a question, if I'm her, I'm telling you no. So, you just kind of have to decide how it's going to go. But we'll do the pro speeches, and then we'll do the con speeches. So bill, question, 3 pro, 3 con, and then basically at that point, it's time to vote. So presiding officer reads the bill, we get our speech, mandatory questions, 3-4 minutes. We'll get our pro speeches up to 3 minutes. Maximum number of speeches would be 3. We then do our con speeches, maximum up to 3. And then at some point, person goes, I move to previous question. All in favor say aye, aye. And then all those in favor of passing the bill, say aye, and then we vote on it. That's that. So that's the general run as to how it goes. What people like about it is you're in control of your bill, your topic. It's not that you have to pull from this subtopic. I'm not giving you a list of 10 possibilities. You can come up with your own thing. It is formal, which takes a little while for folks to get used to, probably 2 or 3 class periods. But it gives everyone a time to speak. So you know that you're going to be acknowledged. It doesn't allow for, JT to dominate where he can ask all the questions because you're just not going to get called on all the time. And the whole hope is that when you're giving your speech, you want people to ask you questions because it gives you the opportunity to defend and advocate for your bill all the more. So the debate aspect is good, as Anton tries to trip me, because it allows for more conversation to take place about it. So that's the main gist of what's going to be going on. There are some formal questions, and we'll go over this stuff as we get a little bit closer to the time, but there are specific statements that you would have to use and whatnot, and certainly already mentioned to you for writing your bill, those are your 4 ideas. Again, for this page, where you're coming up with your 5 possible bills, I'm not worried about it being that formal. You're only getting that formal for the one bill. that you were going to submit to me. You don't have to wait until next Sunday to formally submit your bill. If you decide what you want your bill to be, you can submit it to me. It's just going to my Gmail address, which is on the weekly syllabus that you get every week. First come, first served. Now, I'm not saying you need to send it to me by Wednesday by any means, but if you figure out pretty quickly what you want to do, let me know. You don't want someone else doing that from underneath your feet. Dylan?
What, like, how extensive can it be? Like a multi-part bill? Like, how many different, I guess, subsections could you have?
We've had some very complicated
Because the
ones.
one thing I was
My bill is probably longer than most, with like the sub things of that, but we've had bills that have taken up like half a sheet of paper. So you could certainly say, hey, this is what I want to do. It'd be complicated. Maybe we go, you know what, we need to kind of pare it back a little bit. I guess the only concern would be if you are doing something that is pretty complex, can you fit it within that 5 to 7 minute time frame? Or do you really need to look at more of the theory part behind it and do a general and maybe allude to more specific actions that you would want to have happen later on? But that's all stuff that we can figure out before you have to submit. But we've had things with nuclear power bills that have been very complex. We've had things where people want to go back to the gold standard. So far as currency that have been very complex. We've had like economic reform, healthcare reforms. Those are by nature very, very
That's something you never see it
complex.
Like in actual politics, you never see anybody talk about the gold standard and all.
Well, and I don't remember the exact year, but it was probably around 2009. So when we had that last recession part.